Okay, everybody. I'm going to go over a little review. The test tomorrow. This is not my name, by the way. It's a colleague's name, and she let me borrow her Zoom account. So my name is Lane Nevels, and I hope you've been learning some history. And tomorrow through Friday, I think I actually extended the test to Saturday. I know the last one was more like an assignment, but this one, once you start, you have to finish. So just take that into consideration when you start. You can't click off and then go back on. So please remember that. Um, so I'm going to go over just some of the things that are going to be on the test. You're going to have 10 questions and they're short answer. And you want to make sure that you go into as much detail as possible. So this is just a little um, review. I'm not going to reteach all of this. It's all in your lectures videos, but I'm just going to kind of go over a few things. The first thing is the Enlightenment. And the reason that we talk a lot about the Enlightenment, and especially the European Enlightenment, during this period of time before the American Revolution. So we're looking at, really through the 1600s and 1700s. The American Revolution, of course, started in 1775. So the reason is because a lot of these Enlightenment ideas motivated and influenced the founders of the United States, and even if you want to say not founders, even revolutionaries. The Enlightenment did influence more of kind of the upper class. So we're talking about wealthier people that were able to go to universities. And what you want to think about with the Enlightenment is simply this. And like I said, I don't want to go through the lecture completely again, but it was this sort of this period of time starting in the late 1600s. Some people say even the mid 1600s, all the way through the 1700s. And of course, we're still influenced greatly by the Enlightenment today. So it was a sort of period of optimism. One way of thinking about the Enlightenment is that if you think about science, all right, if I throw this pin in the air, it's going to come down because of the law of gravity. People like Isaac Newton, for example, realized that the universe was governed by certain laws. Okay, and um, these laws were discoverable by human beings. So, if God created the world according to these laws, then certainly He created laws that can be applied to human affairs. And we can understand human affairs and what goes on in the human mind and society. So in the human mind, it'd be, say, psychology. It's like the dawn of these social sciences, or things that go on in society, like sociology, or in the economy, like economics. So we have the law of supply and demand, for example. So there were these, kind of applying these scientific principles and ideas to human affairs, to the world. And so once you understand these things, once you understand, right, what these laws are, again, discoverable by human beings, then you can actually create possibly almost like a utopia. All right. So we all know that there's no utopia, but the Enlightenment was a very optimistic period of time. Some people look at the Enlightenment, the beginning of the Enlightenment, as um, well, around 1651 with Leviathan. This was a book written by Thomas Hobbes. And watch the lectures on, what Hobbes argued. Remember, Hobbes, basically argued that there should be a monarchy, and that monarchy was the best form of government. because you could not, you had to have a very strong central authority to maintain order. So this is very important, and this is sort of a watershed moment in intellectual history because he used a rational argument. So before, it was just the divine right of kings, and therefore God said it was going to should be that way, and that's the way it was going to be. But he actually used kind of this rational argument. All right, he used reason. He said, look, if you have someone that is in authority, then society would be much more in order. Something like democracy is way too messy for somebody like Hobbes. And of course, this influenced John Locke's social contract because he said, what is, what Hobbes argued was that people together, in a way, or you could say Locke argued, I'm sorry, is that human beings instituted and created governments, all right, to maintain law and order, all right. And there's this social contract, which was that human beings would obey the laws, adhere to those laws, and the government, in this case, say monarchy, according to Hobbes, which was the best, all right, the monarch would ensure that everyone was secure, all right, were protected. Okay, so we think of, for example, the pursuit of happiness. Okay, so this influenced our founders, all right, in that Locke argued that as soon as the monarch did not protect life, liberty, and what he said, property, later changed in our Declaration of Independence to pursuit of happiness, all right, then that the people had a right to change the government, all right. And so this is John Locke's social contract. And again, I go into more detail in the lectures. Things like law, like how do you decide what laws should be passed? And a guy named Jeremy Bentham, who's an English Enlightenment thinker, said that utilitarianism is the way you should approach these things. And utilitarianism is simply whatever is going to create the greatest good for the greatest number of people. Now, you have to be very careful with this. And what I want y'all to think about for the test, one of the things that you're going to have to write is whether you think that this is a good philosophy. Where do you think that this could maybe fall short? Or maybe you don't. Maybe you think that's how we should approach everything. Okay, so an example of maybe rationalizing or justifying a horrendous action using utilitarianism would be the dropping of the atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Everyone would agree that that was a terrible thing in the sense that a lot of people suffered, but the way people rationalize it, and the way people rationalized it then, was that if we had not done that, more people would have suffered, more people would have died, especially if the United States would have had, and their allies would have had to do, launch a mainland invasion of Japan. A lot more civilians would have died, a lot more military people would have died, that type of thing. So that's a utilitarian argument. Another Enlightenment thinker, kind of applying laws to economics, was Adam Smith in The Wealth of Nations. Talked about laissez-faire economics, that a country that wants to create as much wealth as possible, that the best thing that can happen is for the government to leave the economy alone, that there are certain laws that govern economics, and if they're left unimpeded, then that will create the most wealth. He also, John Locke also talked a lot about tabula rasa in the essay on human understanding. And tabula rasa simply meant that we are born the blank slate. So if you are born in the United States and you grow up speaking English, you're going to speak English, all right? But if you could be from the United States, um, and or say you're let's say your mom and your dad are from, I don't know, let's say England, all right? But you end up in France growing up, you're going to grow up speaking French. All right. So this idea of tabula rasa is that we are all just a blank slate. That's Latin for blank slate. And our environment writes on this tablet to create who we are. Montesquieu wrote L'Esprit de la Loi, the spirit of the laws. And he talked about the different branches of government, that you did not want all the power concentrated into one person or one branch. All right. So it's obvious to see how that influenced our Constitution. Make sure you watch the lecture on the Great Awakening. The Great Awakening is something that's often overlooked when looking at the causes of the American Revolution. The Great Awakening was a religious revival that occurred in the 1740s and 1750s. Throughout American history, you've had several of these religious revivals. These revivals, when we talk about the Great Awakening, for example, were Protestant revivals. And really, what they did, I mean, when you watch the lectures, for example, on the Puritans and the Separatists, these were people um, that did want to kind of create a new society, and especially, of course, the Puritans talked about creating a city upon a hill. That they were going to create a society that was so just and so pure that the rest of the world would want to emulate them. Now, this, when you start clearing land and getting bitten by snakes and waking up with spiders, on your head, on your face and stuff, all right, you forget about these things. You're just trying to survive. Okay. Once time went on, a few generations went on, this idea started to kind of revive itself. And so, one of the things that the Great Awakening at this time did was it revived that idea, resuscitated that idea of a city upon a hill. And so, this influenced a lot of people in the colonies. And this influence, all right, of all the people in the colonies, did resurrect this idea of creating a corrupt free society. And what that did was it sort of motivated people to, once the revolution started, they started kind of equating corruption with England. And so what you end up getting is a kind of a coalition between upper class Enlightenment thinkers and poor people that had, you know, been influenced by these ideas of the Great Awakening, of creating a corrupt free society. You bring those two groups together, obviously it's very powerful coalition. Now, the American Revolution occurred from 1775 to 1783. We declared, the United States declared its independence in 1776. Of course, at first they were not necessarily fighting for um, independence, but they were fighting for their rights as Englishmen. But this soon changes. And one of the things I want you to focus on is, why did the Americans end up winning? Okay, it's pretty easy, but I want you to focus on that. And definitely focus on Plato's mixed government theory. Plato said there were three types of governments: monarchy, aristocracy, and democracy, and that each one, left alone, would turn into a tyranny. It's easy to see how a monarchy could turn into a tyranny. Even aristocracy, with a few people controlling everything, obviously pretty easy, turns into like an oligarchy where you just have a few families controlling everything. And then, the question is, how does democracy become a tyranny? And what Plato argued is that a majority of people, if you have just say 55% of the people in a pure democracy vote for something, all right, and that whatever they vote for, all right, infringes upon the rights of the minority, in this case, minority could be not necessarily ethnicity or religion or language, it could be just an idea, all right, then the majority can be just as tyrannical as a monarch or an oligarchy. So you have to have kind of a mixture of everything, which of course in our government we do. The monarchy is represented by the executive branch, the aristocracy by the Senate. Remember, the senators originally were not voted on by the people. Okay, the only area of government, and includes, of course, the presidency, the only area of government where people really voted for their representatives was in the House of Representatives, and the House of Representatives is what represented democracy, you might say. All right, that was sort of like their version. It's like, okay, this is Plato's mixed government theory of the executive branch representing the monarchy, the Senate representing the aristocracy, and the House of Representatives representing democracy. And so we have to have a mix of all those. Anyway, 10 questions. You'll have to write a good, strong paragraph for each one. This is the first time I've really used Moodle, so that's why things have been kind of slow. I've been trying to figure some things out. So if you have any problems, you're welcome to text me. I think all of you have my number. If not, email me. The number is 337-501-3502. Thank you.